Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. This is part 3 of my look into the Urza's Destiny pre-constructed decks, and in this video I'm going to be looking at Enchanter, which is a white and blue deck with, as you can probably guess, an enchantment theme. So let's dive into looking at it. So the deck list here, so we have 19 creatures, 10 enchantments, 7 instants, no sorceries, and 24 lands, and then we have a mana curve off to the side there. So let's have a look at some of these creatures. So, as I said, there is a theme of enchantments. It seems it seems a little crazy that it took until the last set in the block to have a deck with kind of auras as an actual theme, but we got there in the end. So these are kind of all the creatures that have that synergize most with auras. So we have 3 Fledging Osprey, which is a 1/1 for 1 blue, and it has flying as long as it's enchanted, which is, it's fine, I guess. 3 Metathran Elite, who are 1 colours 2 blue for a 2/3. It's unblockable as long as it's enchanted. That's a lot more interesting than the Fledgling Osprey. This is kind of like a big deal, I think, that we have a legendary creature as a rare in one of these decks. Just mostly because legendary creatures weren't as big a thing as they are now. But it's still kind of a big deal to get one as a rare in one of these decks at this time, especially. So we have Rain, Academy Chancellor. So whenever you or a permanent you control is the target with spell or ability controlled by one of your opponents, you can draw a card. And if Rain, Academy Chancellor is enchanted, you may draw another card. So this is quite a fun ability. It basically means whenever your opponent targets you with anything, you draw a card. And if Rain is enchanted, you get to draw another card. So yeah, that's a really good deterrent to an opponent's obviously if they don't want you to draw cards, they'll lay off on targeting your stuff. Realistically, they'll just target Rain, get rid of her, and then they'll go back targeting your stuff. But she at least in that way, she acts as a kind of a lightning rod for removal. But yeah, and if she's enchanted, you get to draw another card, which is really good. Basically gives you a free divination every time you or one of your things get targeted. But of course, she is only a 1/1 for 3 mana. But also that effect is quite strong. And then we have Thran Golem, 3/3 artifact creature for 5. As long as he's enchanted, +2/+2, and has flying, first strike, and trample. So this is this would have been quite a bomb at the time. I think it's been reprinted since, and I think it's been downshifted to uncommon, and I think that's a fair shift in rarity. I think just because although that ability is it's very strong, as long as it's got an aura on it, it gets quite a big buff. Without it, it is just a 3/3 for 5 mana, and the fact that you have to kind of jump through a hoop to make it work, especially with auras, which are quite difficult to use, just because you can get kind of 2 for 1 and lose card value by putting them on a creature, because when the creature dies you lose the aura. Just because you have to jump through that hoop. I think it's fine to make. I think he's uncommon now in recent reprintings, but at the time this would have been quite a powerful creature, to make him a 5/5 flying, first strike, and trample, and then plus whatever the aura he's got on him does. Yeah. And then just a kind of a few more random blue creatures. So a Horseshoe Crab, which is 1/3 for 3, pay a blue to untap it. I'm sure that has some semi decent combo potential out there somewhere. I feel like any creature that can pay mana to untap itself has potential to do something degenerate. Yeah, Thieving Magpie, 2 of these, 1/3 flyer. When it deals damage to an opponent, draw a card. Thornwind Fairies, 1 colours 2 blue, 1/1 flyer, taps, do 1 damage to a creature or player. I'm always going to say it. It's weird that blue had this ability and not red, and it's when it's so very clearly a red ability. But This is like the cards like this. The reason why it used to be like, oh, blue used to be the most powerful color because blue can do anything, and it really did really seem that way. And then Vigilant Drake. This has shown up in a few decks. It's just kind of like a decent hole filler, just a 3/3 flyer for 5, and you can pay 2 in the blue to untap it. I've just noticed I've used the card image from the Beatdown box set there rather than the original printing. The expansion symbol's a bit different. Ooh, bit of a faux pas there. And then we have some white creatures. So we have 1 Monk Realist. When he enters the battlefield, you destroy an enchantment. Mother of Runes. We've talked about Mother of Runes before in looking at previous Urza's block decks, but basically Mother of Runes is really, really good. Like a really good white 1-drop. Being able to give protection to something is such a strong ability. 2 Tormented Angels, which is a 1/5 flyer for 4. Obviously a little boring, but a decent blocker. Would have preferred it to have vigilance. I don't know. It's a bit weird. Not really sure why it's in here, honestly. And then 1 Wall of Glare. Oh my god, I used to love Wall of Glare. This is a card that if I could find a way to get into a deck, I would, because I used to think, whoa, you can block any number of creatures. That's so good. I mean, it is good, but it is also just a 0/5 wall at the end of the day. It's not exactly game. It's not going to win games. It just stops you losing, which is slightly different, I would argue. And then we've got some auras to look at, which is good because that's kind of the theme of the deck. So we have Archery Training, which is one of these. It's part of a cycle of growing enchantments in the set. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you put an arrow counter on it. An enchanted creature deals X damage to an attacking or blocking creature, where X is the number of arrow counters on it. That's not awful, honestly. Like, firstly, it's only 1 white mana. Admittedly, it does nothing the turn you play it, but then starting from the turn after that, like tapping to do 1 damage to an attacking or blocking creature is okay, but because it's no other cost than that. It's not you having to pay like mana to do it. It's just a tap. So then, if that keeps growing, eventually you've got like tap to do 2 damage, tap to do 3 damage, tap to do 4 damage, and then like you can really start affecting combat. You can like shoot blockers out of the way, you can shoot attackers. So that's like a pretty fine thing to have on. Actually, this would be a sort of a fine enchantment to have on. Actually, Horseshoe Crab. Give Horseshoe Crab archery training, and he'll just machine gun your opponent's entire army of creatures, which is a pretty funny mental image. 2 Brilliant Halos just gives +1/+2, and if Brilliant Halo ever goes into the graveyard, it goes back to your hand. Just nice contingency clause. I do kind of wish more auras had this these days, because it just it's against the risks of it plays against the risks of auras in getting 2 for 1. But nowadays, I think it's just auras are just more powerful for their cost, so they've done it that way rather than making kind of an aura with a weak effect that goes back to your hand. It's better to have kind of like a strong aura for a cheap cost. Capuchin Standard, and on the subject of weak auras, 1 white mana for just +1/+1, and you can sack it to draw a card. I mean, okay. Mask of Law and Grace. Enchanted creature gets protection from black and protection from red. Now that is quite a strong ability for 1 white mana, but again, it is conditional against obviously some decks. That is, you've just given like a creature protection from their deck. Against other decks, that does nothing. So I'm actually surprised this one doesn't have cycling. So just in case you're playing a deck that doesn't use black or red, this won't be a dead draw. I mean, I suppose it's technically not a dead draw because you could always put it on, say, like Thran Golem. Admittedly, it's not doing anything, but then it's enough to trigger his ability. But that's still that's such a substandard use for it. And then we have some blue enchantments. So Sigil of Sleep means that whenever the enchanted creature does damage to a player, you get to bounce a creature they control back to their hand, which is pretty good. On Meta Thran Elite, that would be pretty vicious. because then you've got a 2/3 unblockable, and every time it does damage, it's bouncing something. So that would be pretty mean. 1 confiscate, where you just gain control of enchanted permanent. Hermetic study, which gives a creature the ping ability, so tap to do 1 damage to creature player. Actually, another good ability to put on horseshoe crab. Horseshoe crab, weirdly, is going to be the the undervalued star of the show here. Private research is another growing enchantment. At the beginning of upkeep, you put a page counter on it. When the enchanted creature dies, you draw a card for every page counter on private research. So I think getting this to even 1 counter would be okay. So when the creature dies, you draw 1 card. Getting this to 2 or more, I think, would be pretty good, because you could eventually get this to and at 3 at 4, you would definitely play kind of a weak creature that when it died you drew 3 cards. That would be like pretty good. So private research, I think, is pretty decent. And then Zephyr's Embrace, this is more of an aggressive aura, +2/+2 flying and shroud. So that would be something good to put on Rain, I suppose, because then she can't be then targeted, and you still get her effect, and like she's then not a risk. So that's a potential interaction there. And then to round it off, we just have a Disenchant, a Humble, a Radiance Judgment, and 2 Drifting Meadows. And then some blue cards as well. So 2 Miscalculations, which is to counter unless they pay 2. Opportunity to draw a bunch of cards. Quash, so this is one of the lobotomy spells. This is the blue one. You counter an instant or sorcery spell, and then you search your opponent's library for every copy of that spell, and then you just exile it. So they lose all the copies. So that's pretty good. And then Remote Isle, again, just non-basic land cycling. So what could have been? So I think this deck is fairly decent. But maybe there are a few cards I would have put instead. Like some of the cards don't. I wouldn't say there's any cards that are. Well, Tormented Angel's not great. Anyway, so these are just some thoughts I had. So Academy Researchers is a card that when it enters play, you can put an aura straight onto it for free, I think. Tragic Poet, sacrifices to get an enchantment from your graveyard back into your hand. Monk Idealist is similar in that when it enters the battlefield, you get an enchantment from your graveyard back into hand. I generally don't know why this wasn't in the deck anyway. It has like such good obvious synergy with what the deck is trying to do, and like that is generally confusing why it's not in here. Iridescent Drake is, when it comes to play, you can get a aura from any graveyard into play attached to it, which is pretty fun. Sarah's Embrace is similar to Zephyr's Embrace, +2/+2 flying and vigilance, so it just makes a creature like immediately quite a big threat. And then Treachery is maybe not completely on theme here. Treachery is, by the way, Treachery is super good card, because it's basically mind control for free, because it comes into play, you untap lands, and you control the enchanted creature. So obviously very, very good card. I'd better say the theme of the deck is more like putting enchantments on your creatures rather than enchantments on enemy creatures, so this probably wouldn't have been on theme. And also I think the rares in here, Thran, Golem, and Rain, are like perfectly fine. I'm really like Rain is maybe like a little bit. Is she weak? I don't think she's weak. Maybe like drawing a card every time your stuff gets targeted is really good. So you know what, Treachery is in here just because it's like a rare aura. But I think the theme of the deck is more putting out auras on your own stuff. So, in summary, I think this deck's actually fairly solid. Not saying it's perfect; it could do a few tweaks, but like it has like some nice synergies. It could have done with a few more auras, but then I think any deck which is using auras as a theme, it has to strike this balance of like of creatures and auras to put on those creatures, so it can be hard to like know what the balance of that should be. But I say on paper this looks okay, just because I think like Rain is Yeah, Rain is quite an obscure card. I think. Like I could I could be completely wrong. It'd be like this super well-known commander or something, but it's a card I wasn't aware of, and it's really interesting to see what it did. But yeah, I think this deck seems pretty solid. But yeah, I'd like to hear if you had this deck, like if you played it, if you made any changes, how it performed. Was Rain's ability like really as good as it seems? Because it does seem very good. Put a comment below. I'd really like to hear from you. But I will be back next time to look at the last pre-constructed deck of Urza's Destiny and the Urza's Block. But until then, thank you for watching and listening, and have a good day.